Thank you, Speaker. I am humbled to stand in the House today to lead the debate on Bill 105, an act that would require all police service across Ontario to be trained in the administration of naloxone. As a registered nurse working in the ER, I have witnessed the tragic results of the opioid crisis firsthand. On the front lines, I have heard from many fellow nurses, paramedics, and police services about the need to address this increasingly prevalent healthcare issue in our province. It is extremely important to highlight that there is an opioid crisis in Canada and in Ontario, and people are dying. I would like to start by thanking Mr. Rick Frayne and Dr. Daryl Gibbon for being here with us this afternoon. Rick Frayne is one of the founders of a Mississauga opioid awareness group called Music with a Message. Rick lost his brother and a friend's son to opioids and now devotes his time to raising awareness on this issue. Dr. Daryl Gibbon is an emergency room doctor who is not currently practicing, who became a victim of opioid addiction and has since made a full recovery. What began as a prescription for chronic back pain became a habit for stress relief that led to his incarceration. His journey to recovery has inspired others, and he now actively speaks out to raise this issue. I would also like to thank Mr. Alan Malik, Executive Vice President and Chief Pharmacy Officer of the Ontario Pharmacists Association, who joined me this morning at my press conference. The OPA plays a key role in providing naloxone kits across the province, and I'm grateful to be able to count on their support. I would also like to thank Dr. Doris Grinspun from the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, who was also present this morning and spoke in support of Bill 105. Finally, I would like to thank my OLIP intern, Peter Supiasz-Czygłowski, who was instrumental in helping me to bring this bill forward. Thank you, Peter. Over the last few years, we've seen a rising trend of opioid overdoses across Canada. Between January 2016 and September 2018, a period of less than 3 years, more than 10,300 Canadians lost their lives as a result of an apparent opioid overdose. These numbers have been steadily increasing year by year, with no signs of slowing down. Since 2003, the number of deaths in Ontario due to opioids has increased by 246%. Here in Ontario, we have some of the highest rates of opioid overdoses in the country. We see it most in places like Thunder Bay, Brantford, Sault Ste. Marie, Belleville, Kelowna, Toronto, and St. Catharines. But these increasing trends are also taking a toll on my community in the city of Mississauga. Let me be clear. The opioid crisis is not a partisan issue. It is a human issue, and we must work together across all political aisles and all levels of government to ensure that our first responders have the knowledge, resources, and tools to respond to victims and save lives. Whether it's firefighters, paramedics, or police officers, it is important that our frontline first responders not only have the knowledge to respond to an overdose, but also feel empowered to do so. That is precisely why our government made the right decision to change the regulations for police officers to be able to carry and administer naloxone without having to always worry about being subjected to SIU investigations in the unfortunate event of a victim's death. Speaker, we know that knowledge is power. With Bill 105, we are empowering all police services to be trained in administering naloxone and to save lives. 60% of opioid overdoses happen at home, and police are often the first to arrive at the scene, which is why it is absolutely critical that we move forward with this bill, because the alternative is simply unacceptable. Speaker, this bill cannot come a day too soon. Even this very morning, we heard on CP24 how police officers from Halton Police were instrumental in saving 2 young teens' lives by administering naloxone, and I would like to take the liberty to read directly from the CP24 statement. Halton Police have launched an investigation after 2 youth lost consciousness and began to experience seizures after reportedly consuming what they had assumed was cannabis at a Milton home. Police say that officers were dispatched to the residence shortly after 2 p.m. on Wednesday after receiving a 911 call from a neighbor. Police say that once officers arrived on the scene, they located 2 unconscious 18-year-old males outside of the home, both of whom were showing obvious signs of a suspected overdose. At that point, officers quickly administered naloxone to both males. Police say that one of the males received a single dose of the drug before regaining consciousness, while the other needed to be given a second dose before he regained consciousness. Both were transferred to hospital via ambulance. The outcome of these 2 overdoses is a direct result of a witness immediately calling 911 and the rapid administration of naloxone by our officers. Halton Police said in a press release issued late Wednesday night. Our frontline officers carry naloxone, and we want to assist. The drug is administered via nasal spray that is carried by all frontline officers with the Halton Regional Police Service. Speaker, I do not want to think what would have happened had the 2 police officers that responded to the scene yesterday not been trained in recognizing the signs and symptoms of an opioid overdose and trained in successfully administering naloxone. I think I speak on behalf of all members of this Assembly when I say thank you for their swift and heroic actions. Speaker, this bill was inspired by looking at all the evidence and from listening to people that have lost loved ones to opioids such as fentanyl, which continue to be a major driver of Canada's opioid crisis. In listening to people's stories of how they have lost family or friends to addiction, the overwhelming message has been that more needs to be done to ensure all first responders not only carry naloxone kits, but know how to use them. These kinds of stories highlight why we need to raise awareness around this public health issue. These kinds of stories exemplify why it's important that we train as many people as possible in administering Narcan, which is the nasal spray form of naloxone. This is why I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Adapt Pharma for having organized an Opioid Awareness Day last month here at Queen's Park. With the help of paramedic services from the City of Hamilton, those that attended, many of my colleagues here were present, learned how to administer naloxone and received a kit. I remember coming back to my office that day and telling my staff that I was going to train them, because I really believe that we should practice what we preach and we should walk the talk. Speaker, as a frontline nurse that continues to work in the emergency rooms, I regularly have to treat patients that suffer from overdosing on opioids. This is why I strongly believe in educating the public on recognizing the symptoms of an overdose and teaching how to respond quickly, because every minute, every second makes a difference in saving someone's life. This is why my team and I will be hosting 2 training sessions on administering naloxone here at Queen's Park, one at the end of this month and another at the beginning of June. In offering this training, I'd like to welcome all members and their staff to attend. As part of our initiative to save lives, we'll be distributing naloxone kits for MPPs to take back home to their constituency offices, so that if anyone should ever collapse from an overdose in front of their office, they'll have the skills and medication needed to prevent a death. Our constituents need to know they can depend on us to be ready to respond should the worst come to happen. Ontarians need to know and be able to trust that our first responders, all of them, not just nurses, paramedics, and firefighters, but police officers too, have the knowledge and the tools to prevent someone from dying from an overdose. Speaker, as I said, this is a non-partisan issue. It crosses all political divides and affects everyone. That is why I was pleased to hear yesterday's announcement from the Federal Minister of Health. Minister Taylor underlined, and I quote, "The opioid crisis continues to be one of the most serious public health issues in Canada's recent history." And she announced 33 new initiatives to develop educational resources for health practitioners on safer opioid use and effective treatments. Mr. Speaker, Canada and Ontario have a bilateral agreement on shared health priorities and will invest approximately $1.9 billion in targeted federal funding over 5 years as part of a commitment to expand home and community care access, as well as mental health and addiction services. Ontario is doing our part by matching the federal government's $1.9 billion and developing a comprehensive mental health and addiction strategy for our province. Our joint mission is to combat the opioid crisis, which is a battle that must be fought on all possible fronts. We, at the Government of Ontario, are doing our part, and Bill 105 is a crucial step towards fighting this battle. The goal is to save lives and give opioid overdose victims a second chance, a chance to get treatment and recover, and to ultimately become contributing members of our society. Speaker, I think that the experience of Dr. Gibbon shows us that opioid addiction can affect anyone, even the most educated of us. His story offers a different perspective from the kind that many of us used to hear when we think of opioid addictions. Dr. Gibbon wasn't living on the street or unemployed. He worked in emergency rooms and just happened to suffer a sports injury that put him on painkillers. In struggling with his pain, he eventually turned to fentanyl. This could happen to anyone, including those with a legal prescription. I'm happy to say that Dr. Gibbon was able to recover and now devotes much of his time to helping others. His experience is a reminder that we are all vulnerable, and at one point or another, we all have our weak moments. Canada's opioid crisis affects us all. It does not discriminate. According to data from a report published last year by the Canadian Mental Health Association, in Ontario, someone dies of an opioid overdose every 10 hours. Let that sink in for a moment. Within the next 10 hours, someone in Ontario is going to die because of an overdose. Speaker, last year in London, over the course of 7 months, police officers administered naloxone to 59 people. Out of those 59, they saved the lives of 57. They saved 97% of the people they tried to rescue. And I would like to commend them for their vigilance, bravery, and hard work. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, my riding, this is where I live, and I'm worried about my people. I'm a nurse because I want to provide care to my patients. I want to help people and save lives. It's my passion. This is why I tabled this bill. As MPP, we recognize this is a problem, and this is worries me.
Spoken and listened to our stakeholders, my constituents, and the people of Ontario. I've heard only support for saving lives, and I hope that this bill receives the same kind of support from all members, because one opioid-related death in Ontario is one too many. Thank you very much, Speaker.